Coverage of the interim budget here on CNBC-TV18. Joining me now, Arundhati Bhattacharya of Salesforce, also the former Chief of State Bank of India, and Vinayak Chatterjee. Ms. Bhattacharya and Vinayak, many thanks for joining us. Vinayak, I want to come to you first because ahead of the budget, when we spoke this morning, you said, mark my words, 13.5 lakh crores will be the capex number. It's not, Vinayak, so disappointed?
Yes, I will not say I'm disappointed, but let me put it in context that I think you're going to see this figure in the full budget because the government does not have a choice because of its stated macroeconomic policy that it is public expenditure in infrastructure and infrastructure capex that has been the prime mover of economic growth in this country of GDP. So the momentum has been 30% and 35% increase in the last 2 years. We were expecting a 30% increase this year also to keep the same momentum. The fact that it has come down to 11% just gives a feeling that it's merely an accounting carry-on budget for the next 2-3 months, because if the government does keep infrastructure investments reduced to a growth of only 11%, it will have serious consequences on the growth of GDP itself. So I would like to just share with you that keep the challenge going, Shereen. When you invite me on in June or July, I can bet now that the figure then is going to be 30 to 34 or 35 lakh crores, because without that kind of expenditure, you're not going to get 7% GDP growth that the country is expecting. But let me stop here.
I put that question to Mr. Somanathan, the Finance Secretary, who was just with me a couple of minutes ago, and asked him if this was going to be the new lay of the land, going back to an 11-12% kind of growth in capex. And his view was that, look, let's not fixate on a number, but he was also mindful of pointing out that we need to keep in mind the needs, and the government believes that private capex is starting to pick up. And his indication was that for the year, this seems like a legitimate, valid number.
For an interim budget, it is a number that is not open to questioning because it is valid only for 2 or 3 months. But mark my words, Shereen, the same government has said time and again that its stated economic policy is to boost the GDP of this country by public expenditure and infra capex. If you make it 1/3, I am sure as an economic analyst, you will also agree that it will have fairly serious ramifications on GDP growth itself. So mark my words, when the full budget is announced in June, July, you will see it reinstated at 30 lakh crores plus. Otherwise, we will have to bring it down. And the same Mr. Somanathan, actually on your on your CNBC show last year, I was present, made the point that this is the stated policy of the government, and he shared a confidential report which was present with the finance ministry that 1 rupee spent on infrastructure resulted in 3 rupees of GDP, whereas 1 rupee spent on direct benefit transfer resulted in 90 paisa of GDP. This was Dr. Somanathan last year, along with the stated government policy that infra investments will continue to be the prime mover of growth. And whether private capex is going to come into infrastructure is a big open question, because there is not yet enough confidence in private sector boards to go back unquestioningly into a PPP mode of yesteryears. Unless there is a drastic resetting of PPP, I am afraid we may be unduly optimistic of private capital filling a vast space between 11% growth and 30% growth in infra spends. But let me stop here.
Well, Vinayak, we will of course bring you back when we do have the full budget being presented, and let's see if your thesis holds good. But let me bring Arundhati Bhattacharya into the conversation. Ms. Bhattacharya, many thanks for joining us. The big takeaway from the budget really has been the fiscal consolidation roadmap that the government has laid out, down to 5.1%, and then of course the glide path. Banks reacting, bond markets reacting. On balance, your big takeaways from the interim budget?
Well, one thing, of course, is it appears to be a very confident budget. It is a budget for continuity. It indicates a roadmap of how things are going to be once the government resumes, resumes its office. And basically, therefore, they have been reticent in the way they have gone about ensuring that fiscal consolidation happens in good times so that there is space during difficult times. And on the other hand, they've also very well reiterated that it is the vulnerable section of the society that they're going to spend their maximum amount on. And that's why the Prime Minister also subsequently repeated that the four pillars, the vulnerable pillars, that is the weak, the youth, the farmers, and the women, who are going to be the beneficiary of the various schemes that the government is putting together, in order to ensure that these people also come up through the ranks and, join the ranks of consumers, and they don't stay where they are today. Their contribution in GDP is actually very much required, because without that, again, I don't think, our potential will be reached.
That is right. But I also wanted to understand from you, Ms. Bhattacharya, the announcement that's coming from the government as far as that 1 lakh crore rupee corpus is concerned for research and innovation. Of course, the nitty-gritties are yet to be worked out. But, directionally, what do you make of the signal that the government has sent out with that move? Essentially saying, look, we're stepping in and we'll provide risk capital.
I agree with you, and it is very exciting, actually, because today is the age of innovation. Frankly speaking, without innovation, we'll be nowhere in the world economy. And if you look at it, they have extended the slogan of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, which Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji had added Jai Vigyan, and now they have added Jai Anusandhan, meaning that they are going to go all out for innovation. So innovation is the way out for a country like ours, where creation of formal jobs cannot only be the government's duty. It would not be feasible for the government to come up with the kind of jobs that are required in order to take care of the youth. And therefore, we have to rely on innovations. We have to rely on the entrepreneur spirit of Indians in order to make sure that the youth of the country are getting opportunities. And therefore, this 1 lakh crore fund is actually something that was very, very important. I don't know how the workings will be or how exactly it is going to be operationalized, who will be the operationalizing agency, and how they will target the people who will actually be beneficiaries of this fund. But the thought behind it is the right thought. In today's day and age, it's something that is absolutely required.
Yes, in fact, I just asked the Economic Affairs Secretary those questions, and those are details that are currently being worked out by the government, so we will have to wait to see the nitty-gritties, the nuts and bolts. Vinayak Chatterjee, I want to come back now, and I know that you would have gone over the numbers threadbare as far as railway capex are concerned, defense capex, as well as the housing scheme that's been announced. Of course, even as far as the housing scheme is concerned, there is no allocation portioned so far. Mr. Somanathan saying that it is still a work in progress. But on the other heads, individual heads, your take?
Look, flowing down from an overall 11% growth in the total outlays, the outlays across most sectors have been pretty low. Road, for example, has, I took a cursory look, has gone up by some 25 or 30,000 crores, which is neither here nor there. So it's a reflection of the total depressed level of the growth in infra outlay. But as I said earlier, I am not reading too much into these figures for an interim budget, because I am taking the view that it is just a bit of accounting to allow the government to function for the next 2-3 months. I will wait for the big picture budget once a new government is in place. And I think that is the right time for us to discuss threadbare whether there are any great strategy changes in terms of intersectoral allocations between road and rail, or irrigation and water and rail, etc. The interim budget does not merit such incisive analysis, is my view.
Okay. Ms. Bhattacharya, I want to come back to you on a point that has been made by the DPAM Secretary, and the government now moving away from setting a disinvestment target, saying that there needs to be a paradigm change in the way that we look at disinvestment. We must look at it in the context of value unlocking as well, with the market cap of PSEs, CPSEs seeing a significant uptick, as well as the dividend contribution that comes in. And no word, of course, on bank privatization either, or the legislative action to take that forward wasn't expected in the interim budget. But do you believe that perhaps, that there is less appetite now to take that forward?
See, first of all, understand one thing. Setting this target is absolutely a wrong thing to do. You're giving a signal to the market that the government is desperate to sell. And the moment there is a desperation to sell, you will not actually be realizing its true value. You need to sell only when you don't need to sell, because that's the time when you will get the maximum value. Till such time, if there is a dividend income coming in regularly, you should sit with it. At the end of the day, this is an asset that was built with public money. It will go back to the public. But in the meanwhile, in the interim, the owners, which is the government, they can look to it as a generator of revenue. And definitely, I do not believe that you should be setting targets for this. This has to be opportunistic. You have to take the momentum when it is there in the market, and then you can definitely, encash as you need to. Again, given the revenue buoyancy and given the way the government is now proceeding, they may not actually be in desperate need to raise these revenues as well. So to that extent, I think, the government being a little more cautious about these matters, or being more, market savvy, so to speak, about these matters, bodes well for everybody.
All right, Vinayak Chatterjee. Since you insist that we must take this with a pinch of salt and wait for the grand finale, which is the full budget in July, what's your expectation going to be?
Same as I told you pre the budget speech. You wait till July and the full budget will give you a 30 to 35% increase, taking the 10 lakh crore allocation of last year to 13.5. And if we don't do this, then the nation will have to come to terms with a lower GDP growth. That's the choice you have in front of you, and that's the choice the government has before it.
Okay. Well, Vinayak Chatterjee, Arundhati Bhattacharya, an absolute pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on the CNBC-TV18 Budget Ballot to take us through your big takeaway from Nirmala Sitharaman's sixth budget. Remember, she's the only finance minister after Morarji Desai to present 6 consecutive budgets. We are going to take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal up next.